Ooh, all right. Good afternoon, morning, evening, depending on where you are in the world, to everyone. My name is Eric Womerick, and I'll be leading today's Decisions Lunch and Learn for the next hour. So I'll introduce myself in a second, but let me talk a little bit about the Lunch and Learns. If this is your first time or you're coming back, let's just talk about what we're doing here. So Decisions, the company, we host every Monday through Thursday from noon to 1 p.m. a 1 hour, what we're calling Lunch and Learn. It's also been billed as like a Q&A session. Really all this is it's time where you can come sit on a call with someone from the Decisions team, a more senior expert member of the Decisions team, and ask anything you want. And we truly mean that. You can ask questions about the company, about the product, about questions you have how to do stuff in the product. A lot of the times this winds up becoming like a little bit of demonstration of showing how to do stuff in the product. And if it's something we can't answer here, something we don't have the information for, no problem. We will follow up shortly after the session is over. So tell your friends, tell your coworkers, tell anyone who's interested to learn a little bit more about decisions or wants a space to ask questions openly and honestly. We are here every day, except for Fridays on 12 to 1 p.m. So today, I do have a couple pre-submitted questions, but let me start by introducing myself for just a moment. I am Eric Womerick. If I haven't met you before, I see a lot of familiar names on the call, so nice to see some of you again. My name is Eric Womerick. I've been with Decisions for I think 8.5 years-ish. I actually worked for the partner originally, so I've been using Decisions for over 10 years now. I finally hit the 10-year mark last month. And I've done a little bit of everything. I actually started with the tool being a junior developer writing some code, believe it or not, way back in the day, and have transitioned throughout Decisions grown, has transitioned through many different teams and roles. I've done big projects and small projects as a professional services member. I've aided with support for a number of years. I actually did all of our security and IT ops compliance, so I know quite a bit about the installation infrastructure and kind of our compliance regulations there. Most recently, for about the past 3 or 4 years, I've focused heavily on the training team. So I actually was the director of training, heading around the world, hosting events and training people on decisions and really getting to interact with a lot of our partners and customers directly. Currently, I've actually transitioned over to the product team directly to help do some product management. So I'm responsible for a lot of the product roadmap, for understanding what's coming down the pipeline, for designing and understanding new features and things that we're going to add to the Decisions tool. And so I meet a lot with customers and partners and understand their needs and gather requirements and write up documents. And I actually have the product roadmap available if anyone's interested to dive in and look at that together. So yeah, that's kind of me. That's what my expertise is. And so I will try to answer all your questions to the best of my ability. And if there's something else we can answer here, we will do so. So yeah, the ways you can ask questions, I see already one in the chat. This is wonderful. You can go ahead and post in the chat. There's a spot you can just open the chat, write out your question, post it there, and I'll be able to see it. The other option is there's a Q&A button on the Zoom info panel. You can click that Q&A button and write your question there, and I'll see it there as well. Or if it's something you'd rather discuss live and you're comfortable talking on this call, you can actually use the raise hand option. If you hit the participants or attendees button, you'll see next to your name, there's a little thing that says raise hand, and you can raise your hand. We'll let you come off mute, and we can discuss your question verbally as well. And so, yeah. Without further ado, start queuing up your questions, start typing them out, thinking through how you want to get them answered. We did have a couple pre-submitted. When you register, you actually can also submit a couple questions to start. So I'm going to dive into those and talk a little bit about some of the pre-submitted questions that we have. I actually need to pull them up again, and here we go. But feel free to keep asking questions as we go. So let me answer this first one. I already saw a hand raise. I'll answer one question live or from the pre-submitted, and then I'll get to you, Radley. The first question came in and it says, I would like to see where the audit log is to see what user actions were performed by specific users. This is a great question. I wanted to start with this because there's a few different pieces and setup and components that kind of tie this whole question together. So let me answer it a little bit generically and then show you a little bit in the tool. And if there's follow-up questions from that, I'm happy to dive a little bit deeper. But auditing and decisions, I'm going to jump over to my local install of decisions. This is just on my laptop, and this is the latest version. This is version 8.3. 8.2. 8.3? Hold on. 8.2. Okay, I still haven't quite upgraded to the latest version, but it's still version 8, the newest version available in this major version. But auditing and decisions is interesting. You can audit really just about any type of data and decisions, or any created data that your users create. As long as it's stored in the decisions database, you can audit that as well. And so I'm going to create a folder here just so I can play around a little bit. I'm going to call this auditing. This is in my Lunch and Learn folder here in the decisions folder tree. And let's say I wanted to start auditing things. So you can audit just about anything. Like say I wanted to audit user logins and have a whole audit history of all the user logins that occur. Say I wanted to audit a certain type of data, like all my assignments. I want to see all the interactions that occur on an assignment. You can do that. If you jump over to the system folder on the far left-hand side, you jump down to the settings folder on the left-hand side, you'll see in this screen here, you have a bunch of global portal settings. So just as a reminder, you must be an administrator to do this. If you right click on auditing settings and click edit, you can see that I was playing around with this a little bit earlier today. You can audit a couple of things out of the box, a couple of activities that occur in decisions, like user logins or the sessions that they're in and what they do in those sessions. You can actually audit the logs and see all the different places that interact with logs. Anytime there's an import and export activity, you can create an audit history for that. And you can just enable these and say save, and decisions will start to track and store log or audit history messages in the decisions database for anything you select here. In addition to that, you can actually audit specific data or data structures. So I can come into here and say I want to audit a custom entity, or even one of the decisions out of the box entities that we have, like say I want to edit or have an audit for all of my, I don't know, every time I change an OAuth provider or an OAuth token. You can do that. And you come in here, you select the type of data you want to audit, you say okay. You can choose some sort of archive behavioral so we don't grow your database excessively. And when you click save, decisions will automatically start to audit the history for all of those things. Now, one very important note here, though, that I wanted to cover on this question is that's going to audit the high-level structures and the high-level data. So what I mean by that is, say I want to audit, let me create a data structure here. So I'm going to create a data type. We're going to create an entity, and I'm going to call this Eric entity, just so I can search for it and find it quickly. And we'll give it a couple properties. This will be a favorite color and a cool date. Set that to a date time. Cool. There's two types of auditing I can enable for Eric entity right here. One is for the Eric entity data structure. So anytime anyone comes in, right clicks and changes the definition of the data structure or moves it from one folder to another, that's one type of auditing I could perform on an Eric entity. But the second is, what if I create an Eric entity in this folder? Oop, which I meant to do that first. Let me allow some actions on my entity and say I create an Eric entity inside my auditing folder, which I might have to refresh to see. Oh, I had to let it compile. 1 second. Yep, let's add an Eric entity. We're going to call this Eric1. He has a description. He is pretty neat. Cool date is today. Sure. Favorite color, blue. But what if I wanted to audit this entity, the actual implementation of the definition of my entity? So this is actually an entity that lives in the auditing folder. And what if I wanted to do an audit history for that? Well, they're separate. The first, to audit the general structure itself, is where I first showed you. Under auditing settings, you'd come find your type to audit. I could just search for it now. Here's Eric entity, great. And click save. And now, anytime I make a change to the actual data structure itself and change the definition for it, maybe we add a new field here and Eric wants to know his current favorite meal. That's a string, great. Now I'm going to track an audit history for changes and events that occur to the structure itself. But if I change Eric1, the implementation of it, and I go add a favorite meal, that audit was not tracked because there are two separate audits I need to enable. So to see the first one or to see any audit history, you go to the thing, you go to manage, and you can say see audit history. It's going to pop open a new tab. And sure enough, I'm going to see a whole list here of all the things that have occurred for Eric entity. So if it changed, I can actually go dive into some of the details here. It added a configuration folder because I changed some of the information on it. I changed the table name that was loaded, so it actually recompiled the structure. And you can start to see some of the history that occurred here. But if I go look at the audit history for this, I probably won't see anything because I haven't audited the data itself. I'm just auditing the structure. So to do that, you actually have to go to the structure definition and edit it really quick, which again will create an audit entity. And if you click on your structure type name, you'll actually see another property here called audit changes. Now, if I click this, and in order to allow this to start auditing things, let me create a new Eric entity. We'll call this Eric 2.0. His favorite date is tomorrow, or actually we'll do Saturday because it's the weekend. His favorite meal is, I don't even know what my favorite meal is. We'll just call it sushi for now, and still like blue. Good to go. Now, if I make changes to the data itself, I go to Eric 2.0 and I say, just kidding, it's not sushi right now, it's pizza, and click save. Now I'm going to start tracking audit history for the data changes, and I can come into here and say to minute, see audit history, and I'll see that, favorite meal was sushi, changed to pizza. None of the tag data was changed. Here's the data was changed on. And all this is tracked and saved in the database. It's reportable with report data sources. And I have all, basically all the audit the information that I could possibly care for and want. So that's the high level overview. There's two ways to enable auditing on the entire, that kind of the general data or structures that exist in decisions, folders, user sessions, those sorts of things. And there's actual data specific auditing you can enable on the actual data itself. You do that on the structure level. There's some more auditing. There's like some really specific rule auditing we can do, which you can enable on specific rules, and it will track like rule edit history with the user that edited them and when it was edited and what changes they made. You also can track rule execution audit history. So you can take any rule and track every time that rule's run, what is the audit for that? And so there's a lot more we can do here. I just wanted to give a brief overview first to just inform you and say, yes, auditing can be enabled just about anywhere. And all these reports have the user that did them and when it was done. You can start filtering and getting the data that you care about. So possibly a little long-winded, but hopefully that answers the pre-submitted question that was sent in. All right. Cool. We do have a hand raised. I'm going to say allow to talk. If you want to go ahead and come off mute, sir, you can go ahead and unmute and ask a question.
Hey, Eric, can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Awesome. All right, so I have a drop-down list in a form, and that list is being populated through a flow. One of the things that I have in this form is when a user picks another selection on another field, I want that list to change. So I want to rerun the flow. I have a variable in that flow that says, okay, now give me this list. Okay. I'm not seeing how to recall that flow when the selection changes on another field.
Gotcha. So let me reiterate to make sure I understand. Sure. So you have two drop downs on a form, right? Like the first is, I always use this example, car make. You select your car make and you want the selection from car make to change the values in the second drop down, car model, right?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay, cool. What do you mind me asking what version you're on?
I'm on 8. something.
Perfect. That's all I needed to know.
Okay.
Because there's in version 6 and earlier, there's a different way to do it. So I just want to make sure. Well, cool. Let's create a really simple form. I'm actually going to use a simple form because I think they look better and they're easier to use. We're going to call this dependent dropdowns. Go ahead and say go. And I'm going to throw 2 drop-down controls onto here. Data. Where's my drop-downs?
And if it matters, if it matters, I'm pulling a list of users.
Perfect. Yeah, we could use that example too. Like groups and users might be.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Simple forms I forgot don't have drop-downs yet. That's getting added to the product. Let's just use a normal form. We'll call this dependent drop-downs working. So I know which one I'm using. Cool. I'm going to simplify my form a little bit. I'm going to remove one of the columns, shrink it down, just make it look a little bit better. Have a button at the bottom that says done. And let's add drop-down one. We'll call this groups. If I hold shift and click enter, by the way, on forms, we shove a label either above, or if you hold shift click or control shift enter, it throws a label to the left. Fun little tip. And then we'll have users. Perfect. Shift enter. All right. Let's set these up to be what they are. This is going to be of type group. The display field that I'm going to show in the dropdown, because it's a complex type, I can show individual field members. We just want entity name, I believe, group name. Yep, entity name. And where is that input source coming from? This is perfect. I could run a flow, which goes and when the form loads, runs the flow to fetch the list and bring it back. I can say hand it in as data, which means we're going to pass it in when I call the form. So whatever flow calls the form, give me the list of data. Or I can say, where are you, list input source? I'm missing an option there. That's interesting. I should have static as well, which means I can just define it myself. I seem to have lost that choice, but that's fine. We'll go ahead and use data name for now. List of groups. But here's the interesting part. I want the group that I select to actually source, this list here. So if this is going to be a list of accounts, and I want to show the accounts, let's show their email address. Where are you? There you are. What is the input source for this? Well, if I click flow, I think this may be where you're getting stuck. If I click flow, this flow only runs one time. It runs when the form loads. I can either pick an existing flow or create a flow, and it's going to go ahead and run that when the form loads one time only. The other way to do this is to say, well, instead, I'm going to get this from data, or I'm going to say I need a list of accounts here as the data that's coming in. Now, where does that list come from? Well, it's going to ask when I load the form from the flow, just like my groups, and say, hey, give me the list of accounts. We don't have it yet, right? We haven't done the work that actually fetches the accounts. So to do that, you're going to use you click on just kind of generic checkerboard, scroll down on the right-hand side, and you're going to use something called active form flows. And the reason I asked is because in previous versions, it's called data flows. They work a little differently. So version 7 and 8 use active form flows. And what this does is it allows you to write a flow. We can say fetch counts, and you write a rule flow, or it should be a form flow, that actually goes and does the work of taking the group ID and fetching the list of accounts. And actually, we can do this relatively quickly. If I come into here, if I go to, let's see, integration, we're going to do with internal things like internal services and fetch. I think it's under group service. Let's see how good I am. I haven't built flows in like a couple weeks. We want to get accounts by group, get accounts for group. Cool. All right. And all this flow is doing is running and allows you to modify. So an active form flow, it runs when the form is loaded by some trigger, and it can do things back to your form. So I'm going to run, I'm going to fetch my accounts, and then there's a whole series of steps here called, I don't like how it jumped, form rules, where I can add validations to my form, I can enable and disable controls, or what we want to do, I can set a controls value. So I'm actually going to say, run this flow on some trigger, get the accounts for the group that was selected, and then which control do I want to set its value, or set a value on that control. And so now I can come here, I can pick from my form, I want to set to the value of my users combo box. Okay. And what is the list of accounts we're going to populate here? And do I want to pre-select one? I'm going to ignore pre-selected because I'm not going to select one out of the box, but I am going to source it from the list of accounts that comes out of this step. So really, this active form flows are super cool. They allow you to see form data, run a flow to do anything you want, and then do some sort of interaction or some sort of user kind of dynamic thing on your form. Now, the only last piece here is that I need to say, how do I fetch these accounts? And again, I'm using decisions internal steps. You could do anything in this flow. You could fetch from a database, pull up a spreadsheet, run a rule, whatever it may be. But I'm going to say, I'm going to get my group from the form, from the groups combo box, the selected item, and then I need the ID. So it should be group ID. Perfect. And that matches what my step is looking for. Good to go. So ideally, it should be this simple, but the concept is, again, I have a flow that I've written and built that's going to run based off of something. Now, the last thing I set up here is, what is the thing that triggers the execution of this fetch count flow I just built? And in that case, I'm going to say it's run whenever your group selection is changed. You can also do it when someone stops typing. On other controls, there's a bunch of other triggers here, like starts typing, enters control, exits control. But you can set up any or all triggers that are going to run your active form flow. And that should do it. Because that active form flow actually sets this controlled data, that should be all I need to do. But we're going to go test my building very quickly to make sure. Run cool form. Oh, I guess I don't have a list of groups yet. I guess the last thing I should do, I'll use that same internal services from now. Integration, internal services, group service, which by the way, this is a little bit advanced work that I'm doing. These internal services are all of the kind of integration points or endpoints or API points that exist in decisions entirely. So anything you do in decisions with a user click or a right click action or something you walk around in is actually a flow step and API service call. So anything I'm calling in here, you could call via API. Just fun little note. And I should have a get all. Yep, get all groups. The output is going to be a list of groups. Perfect. I'm going to then drag this over, run my cool form. Pick my form here, which should be under recent. Cool. And then for now, we'll just end. I'm not doing anything with this data. All right. Last thing this form needs is the inputs. I do need to give it my list of groups. I select it from flow data. There's my get all output. It matches. Selected path is not valid. Maybe. Asking for, oh, that's the individual group. Huh, my bad. That's the selected group. I forgot to rename that. Okay. Well, we're not going to give it the selected group. We're not going to give it the list of accounts. We're not going to give it the selected account. We are going to give it the list of groups it needs to run the form. And there we go. Now it matches. Good to go. Cool. All that being said, hit debug. Let's make sure this works. I run. I should see a list of groups. My install is pretty vanilla, pretty boring. So I have all users, administrators, designers. If I select one, I see in the designer my active form flow run. That's perfect. And I should see this be the list of administrators on my system, which is good. If I switch this to designers, I actually don't think we're, oh, okay, it does change. I see the 4 designers that exist in my portal. And if I switch this to all users, I see all the users, which is, including some of the system default ones and those sorts of things. So that's how you'd accomplish this. It's called an active form flow. I actually can go see how that ran in the debugger just to confirm that this worked the way I expected. I give it designers group and I get back, 4 items and I can test that and see how it worked in the flow. But active form flows, that's going to be the way to go.
Awesome. That's exactly what I needed. Thanks, Eric.
Cool. Yeah, you bet. I think it's on the documentation site too, if this, or I can send you this example after the call if you need more help.
Cool. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. I love active form flows. The thing that gets cool with them, just because I'm here and I can talk about this, is if you think about it, with one flow or even 1 or 2 flows that control kind of all of the dynamic user behavior, you can get really specific validations and rule and visibility and kind of customized behavior here, putting it all in a flow, and that flow can do just about anything. You can even have interactions here automatically, save data to the database and do some cool things. So it's just a really neat way or really good way for you to come and take any interaction on a form and put that data into a flow for you to handle and take and do stuff with. It's really cool. Cool. Wonderful. All right. That was a good question. Ooh, let's see. I got one in the chat. Okay. So next question here is from Mr. Andrew. It says, I'm currently documenting some of our data steps for our documentation. I was curious about a common use case for the compare to object step. Ooh, wonderful step. And kind of an interesting use case. I'm just going to go ahead and let's create a new. Trying to keep my work tidy here. Compare to object steps. Yeah. So just so everyone on the call is aware, we are working very hard. I'm not doing anything. The documentation team is working very hard on improving step information, step cataloging, and step help here. So the ability to go in and actually, have really good documentation and information and information and documentation on any step that exists in the step toolbox. And so we're systematically going through and, kind of finding them, making sure the steps are named properly, making sure they're working well, and then, documenting them so that it's really easy for users to find steps that they need to use and then to use those steps. Andrew's part of that effort. One of the steps he's referencing is one step called compare to objects. This is actually my folder. This is the actual step that compares to objects, any two objects and decisions, just compares them. So here's the thing. What compared to objects does is it converts anything in decisions to a generic object. So really you can compare any two things. You can compare two strings, to accounts, to groups, whatever. But you're going to need to hand it to this step as a generic object. So what the use case here is the use case is if I have, two sets of data or, two things, and I want to make sure they're equal. I want to make sure that they are exactly the same. Say, for example, a use case, I have a system of record in Salesforce, and I pull something down from Salesforce, an account. And then I also have a copy of that working in my flow. So before I do anything, like before I update my account back to Salesforce or call a service that updates in Salesforce, I want to compare them. And I want to say, hey, fetch the current Salesforce version, make sure my decisions versions is the same, compare them. If they are, go update. If they're not, or go make these changes. If they're not the same, then, add a task for a user to validate the, the differences between the two. So it's a good way to take anytime you have copies of data or a system of record that's outside of decisions. It's a great way for you to say, look at these two records, compare them, see if they actually are equal or not. And so let's do it this way. Let's fetch two accounts. So I'm going to say a fetch entity step here. I don't have a good local use case. I don't really have any integrations on my local install, but we can make this work. At least I can demonstrate the step a little bit to talk about it. No results comes to here. Cool. So let's go fetch account one. And then let me copy this step and we'll fetch a different account. So I can show you the differences between the two. So I have two objects here. Let's just all put our pretend hats on and say, oh, this one object is flow data and this other object is fetched from a Salesforce integration or a database or whatever it is. They do need to be the same type. So that is important here. And let's fetch two different accounts. My first account, I'm going to fetch, let's fetch admin at decision. Oh, no, sorry. That's not where I specify that. We're going to fetch admin at decisions.com. Okay. And then the second account we're going to fetch is going to be, let's enter results 2. I think it was designer test at decisions.com. I think that was one I created. I'm trying to remember from the last form I just built. And then I'm going to hand those two objects to the step. Don't get too concerned that it says object here, where decisions is going to understand the structure and compare them. And so we're going to grab the first object from fetch 1 and the first object from fetch 2 and compare. And then you're going to get some options here. Either item 1 is going to be null, which is just a way you can handle the validation of the data. Item 2 is going to be null, or it's going to be done, and we're going to do the proper comparison. So if I run this, bloop, I get my entity results, and I go down the done path, so nothing bad happened. What the output of this is an actual detailed description of the differences. So it gives you a third structure of the differences between the two. So if I look into here, anything that has this marker here is basically saying they're the same, they're the same, they're the same, they're the same, they're the same. If I get to here, the differences is structure 1 doesn't have a time zone because it's blank. Structure 2 has Eastern Standard Time. Structure 1 has this, 4/27/22. Structure 2 has 6/21 as the date. So now you can visually see with this little kind of separator bar, what is the comparison between my two objects and what are the differences between my two objects. So the account ID on object 1 is administrator account. the account ID on object 2 is this. And so it gives you in the structure, it puts in as text all the differences between your two objects. So that's how it works. It does convert everything to string just so that you can do the textual compare. You can then ensure that, I think there is a step that actually ensures that the comparison is equal. What is that one? Objects equal. Ooh, test my knowledge here. There's one that actually objects are equal. Objects are equal is a little different. Objects are equal will actually give you a true or false. Are they exactly equal or are they not equal? Compare will actually give you what the actual differences are between the two of them. But that's kind of the general purpose of that step. Take any two things in decisions, and as long as they're the same type, see what the differences are between them. So, and yeah, a good use case is comparing decisions like live data or workflow data to like the system of record or another source. Good question though, great question. All right, let's take a look here. All right, I see no hands raised. Oh, I have one in the Q&A panel. I missed it. Oh, almost missed yours. Sorry. All right, will there be additional pre-configured eSignature modules added to decisions? We are looking at OneSpan and Citrix/Write Signature for Citrix. They also have a secure file share product they would like to look at. Is there similar functionality available in decisions or planned to be? Wonderful question. Let me look. So currently on the roadmap, and I can say this with pretty good confidence because I just wrote the roadmap yesterday or updated it. I didn't write it yesterday. Sorry, let me be clear. We don't have any planned eSign modules added. I think obviously we have DocuSign, and there's one more I can't think of off the top of my head that we already have in the product. But this is a wonderful opportunity for me to talk about a couple things. If you need this, like you said, you're looking at specifically OneSpan, Citrix Write Signature. I'm not 100% familiar with those. This is something you can communicate with me about, or with your customer success manager or the support team. And what we do is every release, we take into consideration all of our customer feature requests. And actually the goal is to have 25 to 50% of all of our development directly tied to customer requests, either enhancements to existing features, brand new features, or modules like you're recommending, and that sort of thing. And so what we can do is we can take this and we'll create an R&D task out of it, or we'll put it on the roadmap, and we'll discuss it at the next upcoming roadmap review session and see if it's something we're planning on adding to the product, or when we could possibly add it to the product and when the timeline for that would be. So that process is in place for all of our customers. You can reach out to me. It's just Eric, ERIC@decisions.com. Since you're here, I'm going to go ahead and take note of this, and I'll reach out to you with some more clarifying information, maybe about what the integration looks like, what specific use cases are for these, or what your use case is for any sort of eSign module, and we could go from there. But yeah, currently I can answer that question and say no, we don't have any plans, but most likely we don't have any plans because no one's asked. So since you're asking, we'll take a look. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, what about the secure file transfer?
So secure file transfer, we are doing some things around like different file services, like file sharing services. We're starting a lot with our internal. Since we moved to containerization, we're moving to some blob type storage and some non-file storage systems first. But then we're also evaluating a couple different vendor integrations to do secure file share type stuff. We have Dropbox, but I don't know what the security is around that. So I guess I would ask, what specifically are you trying to do on the file share side of things?
So we're looking to build an onboarding system. So It's for financial services. So you have to have an ID. So right now, some of it will be documents, but some of it will be photos of like driver's licenses and things like that.
Cool.
And I know I can put a task out for a guest to then upload something. Yeah, but I think there's going to be more concern about security.
Right. And then if it's already existing in a file share, and where do you put it in decisions, or do we reference it by ID? And there's other considerations there, absolutely. So I don't know of a specific file share product that we're going to be integrating with. Citrix is an interesting one because I know we were looking at a couple different Citrix things that they do, more specifically to security stuff. But anyway, yeah, I think that's really interesting. Let me do this. I will take note. I will follow up with you after this call,
Okay.
probably tomorrow because my day is a little hectic.
No problem.
And let's take a look together.
Okay.
I'll get some better documentation around it, and I'll get it as part of our roadmap review planning call, which is scheduled for next Wednesday.
Perfect.
So, yeah, thank you very much. And yeah, I love feedback like this. Like, we want to continue to add things like this and modules and features. So please never hesitate. Anyone, never hesitate to ask.
And I have one more question,
Yep.
roadmap adjacent.
Oh, cool.
Like I said, we're working with a financial services client, and they are, as one who's worked in financial services knows, they are very slow to adopt upgrades. So we just put in 6.19 for them. They haven't even started testing it.
Okay.
So what kind of timeline are we looking for? What, like, is there some kind of a drop dead when we've got to go to at least 7, or you're just going to laugh when we start asking questions?
Yeah, great question. Typically, it's a 2-year life cycle for any major version. And I say typically because 6 is a little different. But so normally we would say, like, version 6 is now 2 years old. We would say end of support. Like, you can still use it, but we're not going to apply any hot fixes or security patches. So normally, when we release a version like version 8, we do 1 year of like feature changes and adds, and then a second year of just maintenance and security fixes that come out. We add those as well. So like version 7, 7.13 is supposed to be released by the end of the week. That's going to contain a lot of like security fixes and a few patches. Okay. That's typically. Now with version 6, because we changed the underlying architecture pretty drastically from 6 to 7, we're kind of extending that support through the end of this year. So by the end of the year, you'll no longer see version 6 like security fixes, and we'll start to kind of reduce support for it or stop supporting it. So yeah, you got about 2 years, and I totally understand with like fintech. Sometimes things move a little slow. One thing we're hoping to do to combat that a little bit is have like a proper SaaS company have a more automated update. You can enable automated updates not for major versions, for minor versions. So you could say, I'm on version 8, just automatically update to the current version of 8. And whenever we release a hotfix or a patch, it just automatically applies and moves forward. We're probably a year away from doing that, maybe 2. But that is on the roadmap to get to help combat some of that pain.
Okay. All right. Well, then I guess I got to light a fire under them, because it might take them 6 months to test 6.19, let alone get to 7.
Yeah, I would go ahead and start kicking them. And the only thing you really have to be concerned with is if there's a major like web vulnerability or a new thing that comes with Chrome that allows some security thing, we will stop applying patches for version 6 by the end of the year.
Okay. Thank you.
So unless, and I say that very carefully, unless it's super critical, like, so it would just be a discussion we'd have to have.
Okay.
So cool.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah, you bet. Great questions. All right. All right, cool. I did have one pre-submitted question, or one more, last pre-submitted question. I'll answer it really quick, and then if there's no more questions, we'll see what goes from here. So question becomes, where'd you go? There it is. Okay. In a flow, how do I pull accounts for multiple decisions groups? Oh yeah, I kind of cheated because I saw this ahead of time. Anyway, how do I pull accounts for multiple decisions group? Adding a group name. Move out of my way. Sorry, my chat windows are blocking everything. Go away. Chat. There we go. Okay. Okay, sorry. Let me start it over. In a flow, how do I pull accounts for multiple decisions groups, adding a group name to each record? We sync to Active Directory, so the entity name on output is not the actual decisions project group entity name. Output records to include first and last name, email address, and the decisions project group name. Users can be in multiple groups, so you might have multiple records. Wonderful question. Okay, so to start to dive into this, and we'll see where this goes, I'm gonna just create a new folder. Why not? We'll call this groups and accounts. So I showed a little bit about this a moment ago when I did the forms. And so when you're in a flow, we can call this internal services, go away pop-ups. Inside of here, you go to integration, internal services, and you will see both an account service and a group service. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, went too far. There we go. And inside both of these are all of the internal methods that relate to groups and accounts. And so inside of here, you can do a couple of different things. So depending on your exact use case and what you're trying to do with groups and accounts, you can do things like get all accounts for a group ID. You can get, get by a series of group names. So you can give it a list of group names and you'll get back the actual group details and then take that ID and fetch the accounts inside of there. You can get groups for a specific user, the groups that you're a part of. What else can you do? You can do a bunch of fun stuff in here. So one of them is, get groups for account or get accounts for group. So it's not a stretch to say if you have a list of groups you want to fetch by, you could loop through and get all of the accounts for the group, and in that loop create the list of data that you're looking for. That's kind of one option. Also, the account service, you're going to see a lot of the similar types steps, like get accounts and groups. This is actually one you might want to do. Ignore bad assignments. I'm not actually sure what that's here. But you can give it a list of groups, and I think it adds the accounts. That may actually not be the step I was thinking of. There's another one in here somewhere. Oh no, there he goes. But you can start to see like inside of these internal service methods where you can start to find some of this type of stuff. Get accounts by a specific folder, get accounts based off first and last name. Where's the get groups? Yeah, get groups by an account ID, get group count by account ID. Anyway, all of these are in here. So that's one option. You could build essentially a customized loop that says, here's my list of groups, loop through them one at a time, fetch the accounts inside of there and add them to a list or create a structure or create a list of all the different things that I have. That would give you full control over that fetch process, the data you want to present and what that looks like. So I would say that's one option. One thing to note though, or another option, is that we do have some pre-built reports that actually have the combination of groups and accounts out of the box. So if I create not a page. If I create a report here, let me call this combined groups and accounts. And I look at my data sources, we'll see that I have like an account group data source or groups and users data source. What these do is they take those two data structures and combine them for you into one big report that you can write. So now I can say, okay, well, where's entity name? If I could spell, there we go. Wow. Okay, well, we have email address. I could have first name. I could have, where's last name? L. Man, I am just spelling today. I have the group name. I have the created by date. They're created on date for the group, whatever it is, created on date for the account. And so now you could write a report that says, here's your line items of your emails, the first and last names. I think that was the request. You need first, last name, email, and the group name. And you could just have this report here. What's great about the report engine is now I can sort it. So maybe I want to sort it by group, or maybe group it by group and sort it by email. Oh, let me do it this way. Email, there we go. So maybe it looks like this, but now you have a report that does this. So if you need to use this data, you could just in a flow run this report and get the list of data. You can also do that by coming here to results and saying, or report access, generate step to run report. You can get this data as an Excel file, you can get this data as a PDF, or you can get this data as just the raw data. You can get this structured data sent out from here. This way, the data, you customize the format, you get it the way you want, and then you just call it as a flow step. I like that method. But like I said, if you wanted more control over the process, especially with things like Active Directory, where there may be some synced fields or things that you want to pull, or maybe fetch them from Active Directory separately based off of, you know, other properties that are on Active Directory, you would have more control over that in like a flow. So 2 options. I think the quickest way is probably a report. The more customized way is by writing a flow. Cool. Hopefully that answers that question. I can't see my email anymore. Hopefully, if you're on the call and you have more questions, please feel free to ask. But hopefully that gets you going.
So you can. Sorry, I do have one more question. So,
oh yeah,
you were saying that you can pull this in a flow step. So version 2 of this, what I'm doing is I'm going to be pulling in another list to compare, like from our HRIS, to compare that user is still an active user. And so I'd be able to pull this and do a comparison within a flow to spit me out a list that there was no matches.
Yep.
That's what
absolutely.
you're saying. Okay.
Yeah,
perfect.
absolutely. So I lost my flow.
I'm on 6.15. And so are these reports, pre-built reports in my version?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, these reports have been around for quite some time. So you're good. You just write your report and then you could say run report. This is a flow step. You choose how you want that data to come back. You can just have the data. You can have it as a CSV file or a PDF, and then now it's just in a flow, and you can do whatever you want with it. So, yep, absolutely.
Great. All right. One last question: Is there any cautions to jumping from 6 to 8? We're going to be doing an upgrade, and we're looking at 7, but 8's out. So, any cautions on jumping from 6 to 8?
What we should probably do is set up just a really quick call with an architect. The big thing, are you first off, are you using multi-tenancy, or are you expecting to switch like hosting infrastructure at all?
No,
okay.
There isn't. And I'm not there is a senior developer, so it would probably be him. And I don't know if he's already started that procedure, but I just thought I'd ask the question.
Yeah, certainly. So right off the bat, no, most likely no. The engine itself that actually runs decisions hasn't changed a ton. It's been optimized. There's a lot of performance improvements, but it actually hasn't been rewritten or changed drastically at all. What we changed was our code base. So what we write our code in, the framework around that changed. So we did have to remove, like in version 7, we no longer supported multi-tenancy, but it is back in version 8. So there are some considerations going 6 to 8 for like hosting and infrastructure type things because we changed the code. But as far as the actual workflows and the work inside of there, not at all. Those should all be working just fine. We test the heck out of that for all upgrades. So this should be a pretty safe upgrade.
Perfect. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Great question. Cool. All right, I have to complete my flow. It'll drive me crazy. Cool. Let me scan real quick, make sure there's no further questions, or if anyone on the call wants to come off mute or raise their hand, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, I will slowly wrap this up. Cool. Yeah, wonderful. We got about 10-12 minutes left, but if there's no further questions, I don't see a need to hang out and bore you guys with my monotonous tone. So we'll just we'll go ahead and wrap things up. But yeah, wonderful. Thank you guys for the participation and questions. I feel like every time I do these, I get awesome questions and get to talk a lot. So I appreciate it. Thank you. Feel free to join more of these. You'll get different folks popping in and out, talking about areas that they're expertise on or answering your questions as best to their ability. And if you need anything from me product-wise, product roadmap-wise, I know I said I have some follow-up here. Just feel free to email me directly, Eric, ERIC, @decisions.com, or your customer success manager or support team. They can also get in touch with me as well. Otherwise, yeah, thank you all very much. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Have a great week, and I'm sure I will talk to you all sometime in the future. So thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Eric.